You know, they say time heals all wounds. Let me tell you, that's a load of crap. Time just buries things. It packs down the pain and the confusion under layers of new memories, like fresh snow covering a scar in the earth. But some people are like a human shovel. They show up out of a blizzard from your past and they just start digging until they hit bone. I was having one of those perfect, lazy Saturdays with my wife, Amy. The kind of day that makes you forget every bad thing that ever happened to you. We were on the couch, a blanket fortress, some terrible reality show on TV that we were just ruthlessly mocking. I was mid-laugh, my head thrown back, completely unguarded. And that's when the doorbell rang. Now, a doorbell. It's never just a doorbell, is it? It's never a neighbor with a misdelivered package. Not when your life is about to detonate. I remember the exact feel of the couch fabric as I pushed myself up, the way the afternoon sun hit the dust motes in the hallway. Amy smiled at me, a piece of popcorn poised at her lips. "Who's that, babe?" "No idea," I said, my voice still light with laughter. "Pizza guy we forgot about?" I opened the door, and the 7 years between that moment and the last time I'd seen her, they just vaporized. Poof, gone. Standing on my porch wasn't a ghost. It was a grenade with a face I'd tried desperately to forget. Cynthia. She looked older, harder. The years hadn't been kind. They'd been demanding, and she'd paid up. But her eyes, that same frantic possessive fire was burning behind them. And then my gaze dropped. She was holding the hand of a little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old. He had her eyes, but a nervous, shy energy she never possessed. Before I could even form a word, before my brain could even process the sheer impossibility of her being here, on my doorstep, she launched herself at me. Not physically, verbally. A torrent of pure, undiluted rage. "You," she spat, her voice a venomous hiss. "You think you can just disappear. You think you can abandon your responsibilities, your son." She practically shoved the boy forward. He stumbled a little, looking at his shoes. My heart wasn't beating. It was a trapped bird slamming against my ribs. This wasn't happening. 7 years, she screeched, her voice cracking with a performative anguish that, even in my shock, I could smell was fake. 7 years I've struggled. 7 years I've looked for you so this boy could know his father. And you've been hiding here, in this palace. She gestured wildly at my modest house, her face a mask of contempt. "I want what's owed to me. Every cent of child support you've dodged for 7 years. You will pay, or so help me God." I was frozen, paralyzed. My mouth was dry as ash. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, except the car was my entire past, and it had just plowed right through my front door. The math wasn't mathing. The timeline was a tangled mess. None of this made sense. All I could do was stare at this boy. This stranger she was claiming was a part of me. That's when I felt a presence behind me. The warmth of the blanket fortress, the smell of popcorn. It had followed me. "Amy. Hey, everything okay? You've been out here a while." Amy's voice, sweet and concerned, cut through Cynthia's tirade. And I saw it. The exact moment Cynthia's eyes landed on her. The color didn't just drain from her face, it vanished. Like someone had pulled a plug. Her jaw went slack. The furious, confident mask she was wearing just shattered. And in its place was raw, unadulterated panic. And Amy, my sweet, gentle Amy, her gasp wasn't just one of surprise, it was a punch to the gut. A recognition. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with something far deeper than confusion. It was horror. They knew each other. And in that single, silent, earth-shattering second, standing in my own doorway, I realized the bomb had already gone off. I just hadn't heard the explosion yet, and the shrapnel was about to tear everything I loved apart. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I've ever heard. It was a physical thing, thick and heavy, pressing down on all 3 of us in that cramped doorway. The little boy, sensing the tectonic plates shifting beneath his feet, tightened his grip on Cynthia's hand. And then the detonation. It wasn't me who spoke first. It was Amy. Her voice, usually so warm and melodic, was now cold and sharp, like chipped ice. "Cynthia?" Cynthia's panic morphed instantly into a defensive, venomous snarl. "Amy, what are you doing here?" Her eyes darted from Amy to me and back again, the calculations spinning wildly behind her eyes, each one more disastrous than the last. "This is my house," Amy said, her words measured, but I could see the tremor in her hand where it rested on my arm. "What are you doing here? And what is this insane lie you're spewing?" "Lie!" Cynthia shrieked, finding her footing again in familiar territory. Sheer, unadulterated drama. "This is no lie. He's the father. He abandoned us. And you always did have a knack for swooping in and taking what isn't yours, didn't you, cousin?" Cousin. The word hit me like a physical blow. Cousin. My mind raced, scrambling through every memory, every conversation. Amy had cousins, of course. She mentioned them in passing, family reunions she avoided, vague stories about a difficult childhood. But she never used names. And I never called Cynthia by her full name. To me, she was always Cindy. Just Cindy. The connection was a thread I never thought to pull, lost in the separate boxes I kept my past and my present in. The two of them were like vipers, circling each other right there on my porch, forgetting the boy, forgetting me, lost in a feud that was clearly decades old. "You unbelievable hypocrite," Amy shot back, her composure cracking. "After everything you did, after you made my life a living hell, you have the audacity to show up here with this performance, to try and ruin what I have." "I'm not performing. He owes me," Cynthia yelled, jabbing a finger in my direction. "Get off my property," Amy said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous register I'd never heard before. It was terrifying. "Get off my property right now, Cynthia, or I swear to God I will call the police and we can discuss this child support scheme of yours with them. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your history of, let's call it creative storytelling." The mention of the police was like a switch. The fight drained out of Cynthia, replaced by that pure, primal fear again. She looked from Amy's furious, determined face to mine, which I'm sure was just a perfect portrait of stunned disbelief. She muttered something under her breath, a curse aimed at both of us, and yanked the boy's arm so hard he nearly tripped. "This isn't over," she spat, but it was weak, a retreating shot. She all but dragged the poor kid down the pathway and into a beat-up sedan parked crookedly down the street. Tires screeched as she peeled away, leaving behind only the echo of her chaos. The silence she left in her wake was even heavier. I turned slowly, my heart aching, ready to finally talk to my wife to try and untangle this impossible knot. But Amy wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the empty space where the car had been, her chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. And when she finally turned to me, the look in her eyes wasn't one of shared confusion. It was betrayal. "How could you?" she whispered, the words laced with a pain that felt ancient. "How could you not tell me?" "Tell you what?" I pleaded, my hands out, utterly lost. "Amy, I had no idea. I never called her Cynthia. It was always Cindy. How was I supposed to know? You never talked about your family. You never showed me pictures." It was the wrong thing to say. Her face hardened. "So this is my fault? My fault for not interrogating you about the toxic ex you clearly never got over?" "That's not what I meant. I'm just saying I didn't know." But she was already shaking her head, backing away from me like I was a stranger. I can't be here right now. I can't look at you. All I see is her and everything she took from me." "Amy, please." She didn't let me finish. She walked back into our house, our sanctuary that now felt violently violated. And a few minutes later I heard the sound of her car starting and driving away. She left me alone, standing in the doorway, the ghost of my past and the wreckage of my present swirling around me, and I was right back there, 7 years ago, abandoned, confused, left alone to clean up a mess I didn't make, with no explanation. The feeling was so terrifyingly familiar it made me sick. History wasn't just repeating itself. It was screaming the same damn lines, only this time, the stakes were so much higher. This time, it wasn't just my heart on the line. It was my entire future. Seeing Amy's car disappear down the street, it was like a key turning in a lock I thought had rusted shut forever. It didn't just open the door to today's pain. It blasted it wide open, and the draft that came through was freezing cold, straight from 7 years ago. I stumbled back into the house. The blanket fortress was still there. The half-eaten bowl of popcorn. The TV was still playing some inane show where people were screaming about a betrayal over a wedding cake. The irony was so thick I could taste it. It all looked the same, but it was all different. The air itself had changed. It smelled like then. Back then her name was Cindy, not Cynthia. Cindy. It sounded softer, sweeter. At least that's what I'd convinced myself. We met in college. She was a year ahead of me, and to my shy 20-year-old self, she wasn't just a girl. She was a force of nature, confident, assertive. She knew what she wanted, and for some reason I still don't fully understand, she wanted me. She asked me out. She said, "I love you" first. She was the one who pushed us to move in together after graduation. I felt chosen, special. I mistook intensity for passion and obsession for love. The first red flag was a tiny one, a little thread on a sweater. I pulled it, and my whole world unraveled. It was a friend from my chemistry class. Sarah, we'd partner up for labs. That's it. One day, Cindy saw us laughing as we walked out of the building. Just laughing. The interrogation started before we even reached my car. Who was she? Why was I laughing with her? Was she funnier than Cindy? My explanations were like pouring water on a grease fire. They just made it flare up. We had a fight. A big one. To make peace, to prove my love. I did the unthinkable. I stopped talking to Sarah. I told myself it was easier. For the relationship. That was the first brick in the wall. The next was my childhood best friend, Chloe. We'd been friends since we were 5. Platonic. Absolutely, completely platonic. Cindy found an old birthday card Chloe had signed with a heart. Just a silly, friendly heart. That was it. The wall got higher. "It's me or her," Cindy said, her eyes full of tears, convinced I was emotionally cheating. I chose her. I stopped returning Chloe's calls. I broke a 15-year friendship because my girlfriend's insecurity was a monster that needed to be fed, and I was the one handing it sacrifices. Soon, I wasn't allowed to go out with the guys, because guys' nights were just a prelude to hitting on women. My world shrank to the size of our apartment. My phone was public property. She'd scroll through it daily. If I didn't answer a text within 2 minutes, she'd call 10 times in a row. If I was late from work because of traffic, I'd find the door locked, and I'd have to beg to be let back into my own home. And the crazy part? The truly messed up part? I thought this was love. This all-consuming, suffocating, jealous thing. I thought this was how much she cared. She'd cry and tell me she loved me so much it terrified her to lose me. She'd paint these vivid pictures of our future, our kids, our house by the lake, the agony and the ecstasy hand in hand. The highest highs always came right after the lowest lows. I was addicted to the reconciliation. I was a prisoner, but I was the one polishing the bars, telling everyone how shiny they were. And then, the lipstick. My sister Lauren, God bless her, was my last tether to the outside world. She'd always text before coming over, a secret signal to avoid setting off the bomb. But that one day she surprised me. She was in the neighborhood. She forgot to text. We had a great normal hour together, just coffee and gossip. Then her boss called, an emergency. She rushed out, a whirlwind of stress, and in her haste, she left her lipstick on our couch. One tiny tube of innocent peach-colored lipstick. When Cindy found it, it wasn't a lipstick. It was a smoking gun. It was irrefutable evidence of my betrayal. I told her the truth immediately. Lauren was here. She forgot it. But the truth was no match for the story already writing itself in her head. Lauren always texted. She didn't this time. Checkmate. Why would she reapply lipstick at my apartment? A ridiculous, trivial detail, but to Cindy, it was the cornerstone of her entire case. The screaming started. The accusations. Objects started flying. A book. A cushion. And then the TV remote, hurled at my head like a bullet. I ducked. And in that moment of sheer terror, as that piece of plastic shattered against the wall behind me, the illusion finally broke. This wasn't love. This was madness. I locked myself in the bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs, listening to the animalistic screams on the other side of the door. This wasn't a person. This was a possession. And then, silence. An hour later, I crept out. The apartment was empty. The front door was wide open. She was gone. And just like that, after 4 years of building my life entirely around her, I was deleted, blocked on my phone, blocked on every social platform, erased. Her friends blocked me too. It was like she'd been raptured and taken my entire world with her. I spent a month in a fog of despair, trying to find her, wanting answers, closure, anything. I got nothing. just a deafening silence that echoed for years. I thought that silence was the worst pain I'd ever feel, the ultimate rejection. But sitting on my couch now, 7 years later, the ghost of her rage still hanging in the air, my wife gone, I realized I was wrong. This is worse. Because this time, the explosion didn't just take her. It took the one good thing I managed to build from the ashes she left behind. And I have no idea how to even start looking for the pieces. I don't know how long I sat there in the silence of our living room. The sun finished its journey across the floor. The room plunged into twilight and I didn't move. I was back in that apartment, listening for a key in the lock that was never coming. History isn't just a loop. It's a spiral, dragging you down to the same place but from a much greater height. The fall is longer. The crash is so much worse. For a week, I was a ghost in my own home. I called Amy. I texted. Radio silence. Her parents, when they finally answered, were cold, their voices laced with a disappointment that felt like a physical weight. "We thought you were different," her mother said, and the line went dead. I was the villain in a story I hadn't even known was being told. The isolation was complete. I was marooned on an island of my own making, surrounded by an ocean of things I didn't know. But this time, I wasn't that same scared kid who just accepted his deletion. I had fought too hard for this life. For Amy. I couldn't lose her to a ghost. I couldn't let Cynthia win. Again. My last resort was Amy's older sister, Clara. Calling her felt like a Hail Mary pass with seconds on the clock. She picked up on the fourth ring, her voice cautious. "Hello?" The story tumbled out of me. Not the polished version, not the version where I was the perfect victim. The raw, messy, confused truth. The doorbell. The boy. The accusations. The word cousin that had dropped like a bomb. Amy's horrified recognition. Her leaving, the deafening silence. I expected judgment. I got a long, weary sigh. "Oh boy," Clara said. "She pulled out the big guns, didn't she?" Cynthia. Hearing the full name from someone else made it real in a new way. "You know her?" "Know her?" Clara gave a short, humorless laugh. She was the monster under Amy's bed, but the monster was real, and she lived just a few blocks away. They weren't just cousins. They were rivals from birth, and Cynthia was a cheater who couldn't stand to lose. And then she told me a story that made my own toxic relationship look like a petty squabble. It wasn't just childhood bullying over toys. This was strategic, malicious. Cynthia would befriend Amy's friends and turn them against her. She'd start rumors at school. It was a campaign of emotional terrorism. But the crown jewel, the event that broke the family, happened on Amy's 18th birthday. Cynthia, who was always jealous of any attention Amy received, had set her sights on Amy's high school boyfriend, and she didn't just flirt. She seduced him. Clara found them together at the birthday party, in Amy's own house. The fallout was nuclear, Clara said, her voice heavy with the memory. The families chose sides. Siblings stopped speaking. Amy was shattered. She didn't date for years after that. It took her a long, long time to trust anyone again. And then, you show up. The one guy she finally lets in, and who was your ex-girlfriend, the architect of her greatest humiliation. You can't possibly be surprised she reacted this way. To her, it didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt like Cynthia had somehow stolen you from her, too. The puzzle pieces, sharp and jagged, finally snapped into place. The depth of Amy's pain wasn't just about Cynthia's sudden appearance. It was the terrifying, heart-stopping fear that her entire happiness with me had been a lie, orchestrated by her oldest enemy, that she'd been living in a house of cards built by the one person who loved to watch her fall. I thanked Clara, my mind reeling. It wasn't my fault, but that didn't matter. Understanding wasn't enough. I had to do something. I couldn't send a text. I couldn't make a call. I had to go there. I had to look my wife in the eye. I drove to her parents' house, my hands clenched white on the steering wheel. This wasn't about who was right and who was wrong. This was about us versus the problem. A problem named Cynthia that had haunted both of us, separately, for far too long. We had to face it together or it would consume us both, alone. I parked the car, my heart thundering. This was it. The chance to break the cycle. To prove that history didn't have to repeat itself. That this time, I wouldn't just sit in an empty room and wait to be deleted. This time I was fighting back. The walk from my car to her parents' front door felt longer than the 7-year gap since I'd last seen Cynthia. Each step was a decision. Each step was a choice to not run away, to not accept the silent treatment as my fate. The porch light was on, casting a yellow judgmental glow. I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. My stomach was a tight knot of fear and hope. I didn't let myself hesitate. I rang the bell. It was her father who answered. His face, usually quick to break into a smile, was a stony mask. "She doesn't want to see you," he said, his voice flat, already starting to close the door. And that's when I saw her. Over his shoulder, Amy was standing in the hallway, wrapped in a cardigan that looked 2 sizes too big for her, like she was trying to disappear into it. Her eyes were red-rimmed, puffy from a week of tears I hadn't been there to wipe away. Something in me broke. I didn't push past her dad. I didn't argue. I just looked right at her, my voice barely a whisper, cracking under the weight of everything. "Please." It was that one word. Not an excuse, not a defense, a plea. Her father glanced back at her, his resolve wavering. Amy's lower lip trembled. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He stepped aside, his expression still grim, but he let me in. The house was silent, heavy with the tension of a week's worth of hurt. I didn't wait. I walked straight to her, and without a word I wrapped my arms around her and pulled her into the tightest hug of my life. For a terrifying second she was stiff, unyielding. Then a shudder went through her body, and she collapsed against me, her hands fisting the fabric of my shirt as she buried her face in my chest and sobbed. It wasn't a graceful cry. It was ugly and raw, a dam breaking. "I'm sorry," she choked out between ragged breaths. "I'm so sorry, I saw her and I was 18 again and everything was being taken from me all over again and I thought you were in on it. I thought it was some horrible long game of hers." "I know," I murmured into her hair, holding her as if she might vanish. "Clara told me. I get it now. I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry my past is a landmine that blew up our present." We stood there in that hallway for what felt like an eternity, just holding each other, reassembling the broken pieces. Her parents discreetly vanished into the kitchen, giving us space. The story tumbled out of us in fragments, my confusion, her terror, the shared sickening feeling of being puppets in Cynthia's twisted play. We didn't solve it all that night. The hurt didn't magically vanish. But we made a pact, right there on her parents' floral couch. No more secrets, no more assumptions, and most importantly, no more running. We were a team, and Team Us had a common enemy to investigate. The next few days were a whirlwind of quiet, determined detective work. Amy and Clara, now united, became a force of nature. They made calls to distant aunts, to old family friends Cynthia's parents had alienated. They pieced together the story from the other side. And the picture that emerged was pathetic, almost tragically so. The man Cynthia had left me for, he'd done to her what she'd done to me. A few months ago, he'd packed a bag and vanished into thin air, leaving her with a mountain of debt and a son she couldn't afford. Her parents, tired of bailing out their dysfunctional daughter, had finally put their foot down. They'd cut her off, telling her she needed to grow up and face her own mess. Desperate, panicked, and out of options, she'd done what she always did. She looked for someone to blame, someone to use. She remembered me, the quiet, pushover ex-boyfriend, the one who'd always capitulated, the one who'd taken her abuse and called it love. She must have thought showing up on my doorstep with a kid was a surefire way to guilt me into funding her life again. It was a Hail Mary pass, a desperate act of a drowning woman. She'd meticulously stalked me online, found my address, and planned her performance. But her script had a fatal flaw she never could have anticipated. The leading lady from her past was now the queen of my castle. Her plan didn't just fail, it backfired spectacularly. The family, now aware of her latest scheme, wanted nothing to do with her. The rumors Clara heard were true. Cynthia had been bouncing between friends' couches, spinning sob stories to scam them out of cash before they wised up and kicked her out. She wasn't a master villain. She was a parasite running out of hosts. Amy and I drove home together that day, her hand resting on my knee. The silence between us was comfortable now, a shared quiet of survivors surveying the aftermath. We hadn't won yet, but we were together, and for the first time since that doorbell rang, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, directed at Cynthia. Not anger, not hate, pity. Driving home with Amy's hand in mine, the world outside the car window looked different. The colors seemed sharper. The weight that had been crushing my chest for weeks was finally gone, not because the problem had vanished, but because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. We were carrying it together. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of understanding. We had walked through the fire and, miraculously, we'd both come out the other side. But closure isn't something that just happens to you. It's something you build. We knew that if we didn't, Cynthia's ghost would always be lurking in the corners of our home, waiting for another chance to whisper doubts. So we made a decision, one that felt radical and empowering. We went to therapy, both of us, together and separately. Talking to a professional was like finally getting a manual for a machine we'd been trying to operate blindfolded. My therapist helped me see that my relationship with Cindy wasn't a tragic love story. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I hadn't been passive. I'd been systematically broken down. I wasn't devoted. I was trauma-bonded. Unpacking that wasn't easy. It was like rewiring my own brain, questioning every instinct I had about love and conflict. For Amy, it was about separating the past from the present. Cynthia's appearance had triggered every old wound, every teenage insecurity. Her therapist helped her see that I wasn't her high school boyfriend, and our marriage wasn't a prize for Cynthia to steal. We were solid, we were real, and we had chosen each other not by accident, but every single day. The weeks turned into months. Our home slowly lost its tension. The laughter returned, deeper and more genuine because it was built on a foundation we had consciously repaired. We weren't just moving on, we were moving forward, stronger. And then, about 6 months later, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, not with a bang, but with a whisper. Clara called. The family gossip mill was churning. Cynthia, ever the opportunist, had apparently found a new target. She'd met some guy online, a lonely divorcee with a comfortable bank account, and had charmed her way into his house within a matter of weeks. She'd packed up her son and moved in, leaving her parents and her entire life in our city behind. Her parents, the very people who had enabled her monstrous behavior her whole life, were now heartbroken. They were cut off. They weren't allowed to see their grandson. The very isolation they'd helped her inflict on others was now their own reality. They'd created this monster, fed it, defended it, and now it had turned on them. The poetic justice was so perfect it was almost chilling. Amy and I listened to the news and we felt nothing. No schadenfreude, no victory dance. Just a quiet, profound sense of relief, like the closing of a heavy, ugly book we'd been forced to read for far too long. We looked at each other, and in that look was the entire conversation. She was finally free of her childhood bully, not because Cynthia was punished, but because she had simply become irrelevant, a sad, pathetic footnote in someone else's story, and I was free of my ghost. The manipulative, toxic ex was gone, forever trapped in her own cycle of using and discarding, destined to never know the kind of real, hard-won love that Amy and I had fought for. I took my wife's hand. The silence in our living room was warm and full. It was just us. No past, no ghosts. Just the quiet, steady hum of a present we had built, and a future we owned completely. We had not just survived the storm. We had learned to dance in the rain, and now the sun was out, shining on a world that was finally, blessedly, ours alone.